I'm going to go over how to go about making operating budget for your church. Some of my previous videos, I've gone a little more in depth with the individual spreadsheets and how, what each field is about, how it's calculated and everything. This time I'm going to try something different. I'm going to stick to kind of summarizing here, and I'm going to put a link down in the description where you can read the whole in-depth post that covers every single aspect, in detail of the operating budget for a church, and the video here is just going to be kind of a summary. So that being said, let's get into it. We'll start off here ordinarily with a for-profit company. You always start with a revenue budget. With a church, you have a little flexibility there. You can start with a revenue budget or with your expense budgets. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to walk through this starting with the revenue budget, but it really is a matter of preference due to kind of church's unique situation. So revenue budget is exactly what it sounds like. It's a budget and a forecast for all of the money you're going to bring in for the year. So in this case, we've got the different sources listed here: offerings, donations, facility use charges, trusts, investments, and other. Okay, and we project them out for every month for the coming year. We put the first month of our planning period here. So if your planning period begins in July or September or whatever, some other month, put that in there, it'll automatically populate out. And all the forecasted amounts are totaled by month and totaled by source. I'll also point out real quick that all Spreadsheets for Business templates, which there will be a link to the template in the link to the post, so you get that by going to the post. But all Spreadsheets for Business workbooks, the white cells are adjustable. Okay, the colored in cells are either formulas or they're text. So unless you really know what you're doing, don't touch those. So revenue budget's pretty simple, and we'll move on to the expense budgets. Now let me get rid of the fixed cells here. There's separate expense budgets for each of the four kind of broad categories of expenses. The inspiration for these categories comes from Aubrey Malphurs, if you've done any searching on YouTube or on the web. In regards to church strategic planning, you've come across Aubrey's work, and he's does a great job, and definitely a good source of information. I've never seen him put forth anything like this, not to say that he hasn't, but I used a lot of his inspiration in creating this template for budgeting. So anyhow, he breaks it, church expenses, into four broad categories: evangelism and missions, personnel, ministries, and facilities. So as you can see along the bottom here, that's exactly what we've done. Each of these four budgets is formatted in the same manner. So for simplicity's sake, we'll just look at the evangelism and missions budget here. So what you got at the top here is, basically when we take those broad categories of expenses and break them down into subcategories. So do that first and foremost for the evangelism missions here: direct and synod support, convention assessment, local mission work, outreach, etc. Of course, each broad category has its own separate subcategories. Okay, and you'll notice also you'll have to fill those in manually, and also you'll notice that each subcategory of expenses gets categorized as fixed or variable. And simply put, the post goes in a little more detail, but fixed is going to be the same no matter your level of revenue. Up more revenue, less revenue, you would expect this expense to stay the same. Variable, on the other hand, you would expect to increase with revenue and increase and decrease with revenue. Less revenue, less expense; more revenue, more expense. Okay, so you'll see that all these amounts are filled in here, a lot of them with zeros, because there's room for plenty of subcategories. Well, where's that information coming? It comes from down here below. This is where you get into the detail. Okay, so you'll notice each subcategory is listed here, and you can detail expenses, and this is where you actually put in the amounts. So you take a broad category of expenses, break it down to subcategories, break it down further into details. depending on the sophistication of your accounting software or your accountant, this could be, these detailed expenses here could be individual GL accounts or whatever you want them to be. But as long as you address all expenses, that's all that really matters. It's just, like I said, kind of breaking things down here into manageable chunks to where you can forecast them out for every month in the planning period. Then they'll total here, and those totals will carry up here. Okay? So you'll see, like I said, every subcategory of expenses listed here with plenty of room to enter detailed expenses. Okay? So you do that for evangelism and mission. You do that for personnel. Do it for ministries. It's all the same format. Do it for facilities. So, okay, you've entered your expected revenue for the year. Then you entered your expected expenses for the year. Don't forget, like in this example, real quick here, you'll notice this ties into the capital budgeting work that we did too. I like to make my workbooks tie into each other so it can paint the entire picture for you guys. So that's what this means. Most of these are just generic detailed expenses, but this one here talks about snow removal, and it has to do with the creation of a new parking lot that we looked at in the capital budget. So check that video out too. Check that post out too. So anyhow, once all expenses are entered, then that's the biggest part of budgeting. Okay, all that's going to carry over here into your pro forma income statement, where you've got your total revenue, your total for each expense by broad category. Okay, and then we threw in a percentage amount here. That's percentage of revenue, if I remember right. Yes, it is. Okay, just to kind of paint the picture of what categories are contributing most to your expenses. Then we've got operating profit, which is revenue minus expenses. One other thing you have to fill in on the pro forma income statement here that isn't really covered elsewhere in the operating budget is interest income and interest expense. Okay, so this will have to be a forecast. You'll just have to look at, for income, if you have income earning assets, savings, money market accounts, something that maybe earns a little more than that, dividends perhaps, enter that here. Interest expense is going to depend in large part on the amount you need to borrow. A lot of that will be covered in the financial budget, okay? But you can go ahead and do your financial budget, which I'll cover in a later video and a post that's coming soon, and circle back around and enter that information here too. Okay, you're not going to be graded on your accuracy in terms of forecasting. This can be a living document. Come back and change it as you need to. All right, so operating profit minus these interest expenses. Churches don't pay taxes. So there's net profit. Okay, and there's a couple of simple ratios left in here that are applicable for churches. Okay, you got profit margin, which is pretty self-explanatory. Your net profit compared to your net sales times interest earned, looks at those, looks at interest expense, and operating profit, how it relates to it. Degree of financial leverage, again, the post will get into more detail, and degree of operating leverage, we'll get into more detail on that too. Those are two interesting concepts that basically tell you what based on degree of financial leverage, based on the amount of money you borrow, what effect increasing and decreasing operating profit would have on that, or the effect. You'll have to read the post to get into detail, because if I start talking about it, I'll go on for an hour here. And like I said, I'm trying to make this summary. So basically, the effect of degree of financial leverage is the effect of interest expense on profit. Degree of operating leverage is the effect of fixed expenses, fixed costs on profit. Okay, and that's why I ask you guys to specify whether costs are fixed or variable here. Okay, so that's what that was for. Read more about that. Like I said, we've got the chart down here. Pretty straightforward, just an illustration of what happens month by month based off of your forecast. You've got the green line is revenue, and then you've got your different categories of expenses here. You can see how they rise and fall in total and by category. So one little extra bonus that I like to add to my industry-specific spreadsheets is this likely best case, worst case scenario. Okay, I think this is super valuable, and it is another step in the whole strategic planning thing, which is time consuming in that, but really it's just like I said, the plus one, however you want to put it, to the operating budget. This is where you've input your expected revenue, costs, profit, etc. Now you get to toy with what the worst case would be and the best case would be, and this just like most of strategic planning, just get your mind working in that direction so you're completely comprehensively prepared for the upcoming year. Okay, so it starts off here with the pro forma income statement. That's what this is. I should have put pro forma in there, but yeah, it's pro forma income statement, or rather this, okay, so this is revenue up here where you can toy with best case amount for each revenue source, worst case amount, or you can just use a generic multiplier. Okay, so basically what that means is, like, if I change this, worst case is going to be negative in the case of revenue, the 15%, you're going to see these worst case amounts decrease, okay, because I made the worst case that much worse. Okay, but so you can change that there. It will affect everything in that section, but you also have the ability to override it. Okay, so see, if we delete this, worst case would be 38,000 versus 42,000 for trust investments and bequests. But say you think, no, worst case could be worse than that, or worst case wouldn't be quite as bad. Well, then you just override that amount. Okay, everything else is based off of this multiplier, but now you've overridden it with an amount. So same principle on the best case side. Come down here to expenses. We have our broad expense categories, and again, use a multiplier. This is just a ballpark figure, the multiplier basically. If best case for expenses is going to be that they decrease, worst case for expenses is going to be that they increase. And I keep doing that. So keep that in mind, and you can override if you don't like what you see. So yeah, just toy with it. That's the whole point of this exercise. Just toy with it. See what playing with different scenarios gives you, what it makes you think about, what you might do to plan to avoid a worst case, what planning you might do to take advantage of a best case. Okay, so just like the pro forma income statement on this executive summary, you got your operating profit here. You can see negative under worst case. This will match what's on the executive summary, the 10,028 operating profit. And best case, considerably better, 6 times the operating profit. So that's pretty good. And it brings in interest, income, and expense here also, and then net profit. All is calculated the exact same as it is on the executive summary. So then, of course, the whole purpose of ratios is to kind of put amounts into perspective from your financial statements, and the same thing takes place here. Profit margin can range from negative 17.8 to positive 27.2 times interest earned. Degree of financial leverage is going to change. All that is going to change based off of what you enter in the best case and worst case fields above. So anyhow, that's a quick rundown of the church operating budget template. Go get your own copy to toy with. All you gotta do is follow the link, and there'll be links on there. Follow the link to the post. There'll be links on there to download your own copy of it. And then, if you're dealing with concepts you're not familiar with, just check out the post. I've got more or less every single field on here addressed in there. And, if you get stuck on something, just check that out, and it'll help you make sense of what you're looking at. So, appreciate you guys' time. Appreciate you watching this video if you have until this point at the very end. YouTube is a popularity contest, just like anything on the internet. And if you like this video, if you think this seems like something useful to you, the best way to let me know is to either leave a comment down below, or better yet, maybe, I don't know, depends on the YouTube algorithm. Comments are good, likes are good, subscriptions are good, I know, alerts are good, any of that stuff. Feedback's good. I'll crank out more content. There's also a lot of stuff to check out, not just for churches, but for small businesses in general, on Spreadsheets for business.com. Thanks, you guys. Take care.